Hi there, join our exclusive WhatsApp community to learn more about cyber GRC.
Those organized crime, all of us can agree, common ones out there. I think the big ones out there, let's be honest, is organized crime. Most people are trying to, it's for financial gain, bulk of the time recently. Yes, we have groups like activists, nation state actors, but most people are really out there to steal. That's the bottom line. And their common activity will be ransomware campaign, banking trojan, credential theft, payment card fraud, cryptocurrency fraud, data theft. Now we have deep fake. So many of those are just for financial gains at the end of the day. Occasionally you have state actors, activists, people that have social justice issue they are fighting, but bulk of the time, I can probably say over 80% will be organized crime at the end of the day. Data handling and sanitation. So let's pause for a second, think for a second, because data is so critical in our world today. Think for a second. A company like Google, now with OpenAI and all these guys, even EV makers, Xpeng, Rivian, and other EV makers out there today, their biggest assets is not even charging stations, it's the data. So it's strictly data right now. So data is really what's ruling everything. Now, even with your AI model, the biggest challenge right now with AI model, believe it or not, is not really the AI agent you're creating, is industry specific data. Because the data mining is the agent to do it. But data is what's really missing. That's why you find people they want to do, domain areas that can come up with good aggregated data that the AI model can work on. So data is it's a big deal. So now the question is, how do we sanitize the data to clean it? For the data you are holding, especially if it's a customer record or something, what is the process to destroy this data, the destruction process? Then how do you document it in general? So it's a big deal. Sanitization of your data is very important. So a question can be, what factor determine whether sanitization of physical distribution should be used for storage media? Consider the sensitivity of the data stored, of course. If it's a sensitive data, then that's going to be a big deal. If it's a data that is open source, open on the public domain, or public website already, then maybe we don't care about it, right? But if it's a data that is sensitive, critical, and has its own ramification if it's exposed, then we do care in those cases, right? Okay, vulnerability management in simple terms, there is a lot of factors around how do we make sure we have a process to identify flaws in our system. So we use vulnerability scanners. We have common vulnerability and exposures process. Then once you identify a vulnerability within the vendors, most vendor would have patch deployed, which is to fix those vulnerabilities in general. Now, in the process of fixing the vulnerability, I'm not just going to make you just come to my organization and fix a vulnerability alone. I have to have a patch management process also because, hello, the patch you're giving me, how do I know it's not also infected? There's no way I can know, right? So it's also very important we know the patches are also, there's a process around managing those patches also, very important. So um, a question out there, what mitigation control can be implemented when a critical vulnerability has no available patch? So something happened a few months ago. We had the blue screen with what tool was that again? Was that CrowdStrike? So you can imagine it might be a 0-day attack whereby we have no idea of the attack and it's here now. There is no known specific patch for it. So what do we do? So we implement a network segmentation, make sure we are monitoring, have a virtual patching through firewall rules, disable any vulnerable features. One thing that is very important is any configuration setting that is not required, disable it. That's a common practice, right? So it limits the risk within your organization. So it's a very important one. File integrity hashing. How does hashing work? It allows users to verify integrity of download files by comparing the hash values. So mostly when you input the data, there is a value inputted. When it's the output also would give you like a verification to know that, okay, whatever I inputted was what came out. So that process in general, they use some algorithm for hashing. We have the common one recently has been SHA 256. There's 512 also used. You know, some of these are no longer in use, the likes of MD5 and SHA1, because of it's been shown to have been broken in the past. So because of that, changes have been made over and over again. So most is always going to be SHA 25 and 256 above in general. So if you see a question like that, immediately think either 256 or 512. The intrusion prevention system, this is really a system that monitors the network. It detects and block any malicious activity in real time. So now we have intrusion detection system and intrusion prevention system together now. So it's not just detecting. So there's the detecting part of it, but this does not just detect, it blocks it in real time, which is pretty cool. Historically, most people use the detect. So I know there's a problem, but there's nothing after that detection. But intrusion prevention says, okay, we've detected it. Now we are just going to prevent it, isolate the incident, then further research can be done in general. So question here, what factors should be considered when deploying an IPS in active mode? So these are the modes out there. Monitor mode is just going to, you know, observe the traffic and generate alerts, but does not block the attack in real time. Active mode automatically block the traffic, matching the attack signatures. Audit mode, it records all the details, analyze it. Sensor mode, distribute monitoring across multiple points in the network. For every one of this mode, the challenge is this. The challenge remains, what is the impact on the business though? So we are thinking and saying, I hope it doesn't affect us too much because we have a business to run too, right? So especially false positive. One of the big challenges I've seen is false positives. So false positive is a big one that, okay, we don't want to do all this and it's just, a lot of false positive out there. Social engineering, we've talked about this before. Some general things around social engineering will be link inspection, some ways we can pre- prevent ourselves from being attacked. When you see a file, instead of clicking it, you can over your mouse on it and it will give you an idea of the URL so you can easily know, okay, this is a suspicious domain. I scratch it out. Security awareness, we have to always have a process to create awareness within your business. Then you should have a reporting procedure within your organization also. How do you report when there is a potential phishing campaign? Data privacy, we have controller versus processor. So the controller determines the purpose and the means of processing your personal data, you know? So you are the ones that is determining, okay, what is the purpose of processing this personal data? The processor, on the other hand, are the people that actually process the personal data on behalf of the controller. That's really what it is, really. So there's a controller, there's a processor in general, So the question now is, can the organization be both a data controller and a processor? Yes. An organization can act as both a controller for some data, e.g., employee information, customer database, and as a processor for other data when providing services to those clients. But the roles must be clearly defined for each of the processing activity. That's the key word. As long as there's disclosure, transparency around it, then an organization can be both in this case. End user training, we can agree at the end of the day, we have to continuously train our end users. The method of delivery, using multiple channels, online, interactive session, micro learning, real time, practical application, simulation, phishing attack, tabletop exercises. Then you have to measure the effectiveness of this training you're doing. How does it help your organization? Then find ways to continuously improve the training also. Shadow IT. Um, this is really, I'm sure most of us have been part of this in the past. This is a technology you deploy without explicit knowledge of your IT department or their approval. So this was before a lot of tools have been deployed to prevent such. Many of us would have tons of other application downloaded that is not approved by our business, our organization. Now, most times, people don't even allow you to download anyway, as per the group policy, which has a lot of benefits. It's at least reduce the risk for all of us in general. Um, okay, so that's so a question: what are some indicators that shadow IT might be prevalent in our organization? So, for example, if we see unexpected cloud service in your network traffic, expense report for unknown software subscription, department completing project without IT involvement, user experience frustration. So anytime you see inconsistency, performance issue, awkward network that you can feel is not really part of your organization network, you will tell that there's a shadow IT. Somebody is using other application in your system. So now most people just block it. You can't even do it anyway. So makes it easy for everybody. Data protection and masking, this is a big one out there in general. You will notice when you try to enter your socials online, you can see probably the last four digits, but as you type the other ones, it automatically masks it. It's by design. It's a security function out there to mask your information, and it's very important out there. So, but unlike encryption or tokenization, masked data cannot be restored to its original form. Because it's concealing portions and they're permanently removed or replaced in general. You can't bring it back. When would data masking be preferred over tokenization for protecting credit card data? Um, Masking is preferred when the full card number never needs to be retrieved again, like receipts or account displays, while tokenization is better when the original number must be retrievable for further transaction or processing. So those are some things to just put in mind. Incident response, let's keep it simple. We're saying, how do you respond if there's an incident? There's an attack. What is the plan you have in your organization to respond? Most people will use playbooks inclusive in their response plan. So, which is the big one out there in general. Security control types. Can we all type this real quick? The common three types we have preventive, detective, corrective. Can we all type preventive, detective, corrective? Deterrent is also there. It's mostly a way to kind of discourage people from, you know, doing certain tasks. It's just a deterrent. So sometimes you see a warning sign in an organization just to kind of get people not to come inside. We can say camera recording you just to kind of deter you from coming to steal because we have a camera around. Now, that's not going to prevent you. The camera is already detecting you, but the sign can be also a deterrent in general, you know. So you notice at times, you notice when you're driving, they will say, you see some highway that says, you have those signals and police markers on the highways. So you know it's a deterrent. There's no police there, but if you pass certain speed limit, it will start blurring. So it shows that, hey, there's no police, but hey, this is urgent. You're going beyond the speed limit. So, okay, let's juggle a little. Which is the detective control out of this? Which is the detective control? Intrusion detection system, password policy, firewall, encryption. I think one of the names already spelled it out. Excellent. So, which is the preventive control? Which one is preventing? Excellent. All right, mobile device security jailbreaking. All right, let's say um, so many times for Android we call it routing. For iOS we call it jailbreaking. So most time what we're doing is anytime somebody can install unauthorized softwares on a system, that's jailbreaking. So many times you notice that okay, somebody buys an iOS, Android out there, and they're trying to install their own kind of software. So they jailbreak it. In the case of Android, it's rooting, you know. But it has a lot of security risk when you do that, because now you're bypassing built-in security controls. Potentially, you're allowing installation of malicious app. You are preventing updates of security patches or devices on your own system. And many times when you do that, you void your warranty and support for those um, Android or iOS devices. So just something to be mindful of. Why might a user choose to jailbreak their device despite the security risk? Well, users jailbreak device to access unauthorized app, customize interface, remove bloatware, access carrier lock features, enable tethering. So these are some reasons people do it. It doesn't make them right, but these are some common reasons. All right, let's quickly check this real quick. What is the main risk of jailbreaking? What is the main risk? Yep. Yep. All right, technical depth and documentation. Okay, so many times a properly documented script and automation helps prevent single points of failure in IT operation in general. So knowledge sharing, business continuity plan, risk reduction. Um, so in general, an effective script documentation always include a purpose for it, a clear requirement, the instruction for the usage. How do you handle error? Can we all type in that word error handling real quick if you don't mind? Can we type error handling and I'll tell you why. So error handling is important because sometimes it's not enough. You have to make provision to say in the process of back and forth there will probably be an error, and how do we handle the error? There should be a clear path on handling errors. Very important. Then we have the input output specification also, meaning whatever you put in, how do we verify and confirm is the same output? Then version history. The versioning, we're talking about the changes. How do we ensure whatever you make changes on, can we track it and document it over time? So version control is a big one out there too. So that takes us to version control. So we're talking about how do we track the changes to document the code, the file over time. So we want to know when was it created, the changes that are made, who reviewed and approved it, the access and retrieval at every point in time. So it's a big part of the process in general, version control. Um, what are security benefits of version control for your policy and procedure? It provides accountability, maintain your compliance evidence, prevent unauthorized modification. So the benefits are huge because now you can track, you can preserve evidence, you can check audit trail, and it keeps the accountability part of it going for sure. All right, let's quickly talk. Which is the benefit of version control? Which is the benefit of version control? Excellent. Track changes. Yep.
Hi there, join our exclusive WhatsApp community to learn more about cyber GRC.